Hello and welcome everyone today. We're so excited to have you. Today's webinar session is brought to us by Sean Olds from Boodle AI. We're super excited to hear from him. He's going to be sharing best kept secrets for moving your donors up your donor pyramid. So we're very excited for that. Few housekeeping items before we get going. Did wanted to let everyone know that yes, today's webinar session is recorded and the slides will be sent to you. So no need to panic as you're frantically taking notes. You can always reference back and those resources will be available to you. Also today, you guys have a great opportunity to speak with Sean in real time. So please, please, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat. I'm sure he would love to answer them for you. Today is really about you and getting you some answers to help you at your organization. So do not be shy about questions. Also did want to call out that there's lots of free resources available on achievecauses.com/resources. We have all kinds of, web audit downloads, end of year fundraising guides, blogs, podcasts, past webinars, etc. So lots of free resources at your fingertips if you need them. But without further ado, I'm going to kick you over to Sean and we're going to launch a quick poll if you want to respond to that as well. Let us know where you're at in terms of how your organization uses your donor pyramid. So we would love to see your responses for that as well. Seeing a few answers trickle in. Don't be shy. All right, Sean, I will turn everything over to you.
Okay, thank you. I see a few more trickling in, but a lot of, I don't use the donor pyramid, but I'll address that in a minute. Thank you so much, Erica. As Erica said, my name is Sean Olds, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Boodle AI. We've been on a mission for the past 6 years to help organizations like yours achieve and exceed their fundraising goals. And a lot of people ask kind of whenever they're having someone share their ideas with them, what's their background? And my background started out in the military, and after a few years in the military, went into build companies and have been building companies over past 20 years, mostly in the tech space, both domestically and internationally. But the other thing I've consistently done is for 25 years now, I've always served on some sort of nonprofit board. I started out in the youth education space, literally the first week after I graduated from West Point. And for 25 years have always served on some sort of youth education nonprofit. After the military, spent time serving on a variety of different veteran service organizations. And I like to say that the genesis of Boodle is basically my co-founder and I's laziness. We spent 25 years banging our heads against the wall, trying to help nonprofits raise money, and found it to be very ineffective and inefficient. And we wanted to find a way to bring data and machine learning and technology to nonprofits to make it easier. And that's what we feel we've done. And then the analogy I like to use is we're all sitting on Zoom today. We've each spent the past 2 years on Zoom. And I'd be willing to make a bet with almost anybody who's on this call that 90% of the people that you have been talking to could not explain to you how video over IP works. But they don't have to, because Zoom has made it the press of a button. And that's what we at Boodle try to do. We don't want development teams to have to learn data science and modeling. We want them to be able to use that benefit and be able to do what they're good at, which is engaging donors and ultimately focusing on the organization's mission. Next slide, please, Erica. And one of the best ways you're going to do that is by how you prepare. All successful fundraisers have to have some preparation for it. You walk into a major gift meeting and don't understand who that person is you're sitting aside on the opposite side of, that the likelihood of getting a donation is going to become very, very difficult. What we find is that one of the best ways to prepare is really getting to know your donor, and indifferent to whether it's a major gift donor, a monthly recurring donor, or that first time donor who's come in, just getting to understand them a little bit better. Erica, next slide, please. So I saw many of you don't use the donor pyramid. I'm assuming though everyone has understands what the donor pyramid is and how it's been used. It's been around a long time. Nonprofit space has used the tool to help better understand the donors and segment them by donation and type of engagement. Segmentation is one of the key components to preparing for any fundraising campaign that you're about to do, and really defining your fundraising strategy that will end up delivering the right ask to the right person. Traditionally, organizations have focused donation value and frequency when segmenting their donors amongst the tiers in the pyramid. And that's a great place to start, but this method only allows you to define the status quo of your current donors. And it doesn't really account for the vast number of prospective donors in your midst that are potential, and the hidden potential that they have. I'll tell you a great story later on of where we uncovered an individual who had been donating $100 a year for 8 years, and then made a major gift donation once they were asked in the proper way. So each of your donors and prospects has the potential for something greater. And when you embrace the donor pyramid, you can bring out the true purpose of each of those and identifying who's sitting at the various levels and what that unmet potential really is. So it's easy to understand how you could take a newsletter subscriber and they could become a really good first-time donor. How you could take valuable new donors, first-time donors, and they can become some of your best recurring or sustaining donors. And how you take some of those sustaining donors and turn them into your best lifetime donors. And how you take large gift donors and get them into becoming recurring major gift donors or planned gift donors. The list goes on, and there's many opportunities, but it really takes understanding them and who they are. Next slide, please, Erica. Now, the hardest part about knowing who has the greatest potential and how to approach them can be answered in understanding 3 simple questions. Number 1, who is your perfect donor? Or what does your ideal donor look like? Number 2, what message resonates best with them? And number 3, how do you ensure that the message will resonate and engage the perfect donor? So it's not enough to just deliver the right message to the right person anymore. You have to deliver the right message to the right person in the medium that they want to be communicated with and that they'll act upon. Being able to answer these questions confidently is the holy grail of fundraising and exactly why we're here today. Erica, next slide. And I forgot to say at the beginning, if you've got questions as we're going through, if something I say raises a question, please pop it in the chat. Erica's going to interrupt me. I'm actually not paying attention to the chat, but she'll interrupt me. I'd rather answer questions as we go than kind of save them all to the end. So please feel free. So the first step in making the once impossible possible is to harness the power of something today that you weren't yesterday. I like to use the analogy, the sun has been beating down on this earth for billions of years, but it literally was only in the past 100 years, a very small portion of the time the earth's been here, that the first solar patent was filed. And it's only been in the past decades that we've actually started to harness solar power. So that power has been here all along, but we really haven't been using it. Very analogous, nonprofits have been sitting on top of donor data for decades, but they really haven't been harnessing it. And so that's something you can do with predictive analytics and machine learning. As you all know, your organization's most powerful resources truly are your donors. And that's what gives you the ability to meet your mission. But if you don't maximize the potential of them, you're not going to maximize the potential of your mission. So the challenge, you most likely don't know much about your donors. A lot of organizations will tell us, I have very skinny data or limited data or messy data, which makes it difficult for you to really understand your donors and really personalize the messaging. Thankfully, there's a lot of great new technology in just the past decade that has come out. And if there is lemonade to be made out of the lemons of the pandemic, I truly believe that nonprofits have accelerated more around the technology adoption curve in the past 2 years than they did the past 2 decades. And that's helping nonprofits in really achieving new goals in their fundraising and their missions. So this technology is granting you access to patterns, behaviors, and passions that matter most to your donors. And at lightning speed, you're not having to wait weeks or months to get this information back. So that you can confidently drive your donors up the donor pyramid and understand who has the potential while knowing and placing the appropriate ask in front of them. So what is the exciting revolutionary technology, you may ask? Erica, next slide, please. It's predictive fundraising. Predictive fundraising allows you to take a huge leap forward in donor intelligence to identify emerging donation opportunities, improve your donor pyramid movement, and personalize the communications going out to your donors. It allows you to get to know your donors on a more granular level so that you may determine where they really belong on your donor pyramid, rather than just kind of the old standard of moving them through slowly and forcing them into certain levels, and really develop an ultra targeted list based on each donor segment. Having that clear understanding of where your donors belong in the pyramid and where they have the potential to grow to really allows you to begin pushing them up the pyramid with confidence and potentially skipping some levels where appropriate. Next slide, please, Erica. So what if you were able to uncover key donor traits for each of your donor tiers? Imagine at the bottom there, you see the prospects, being able to identify affinities to detect those who truly care about a cause. There's a statistic out there that's been around for about a decade that 80% of first-time donors never come back. They get pulled in on a Giving Tuesday or on an ice bucket challenge or because a friend's running a race, but they really don't have an affinity for the cause and they're not going to come back. But that means that 80% of a development team's time is wasted trying to get those people to move up the donor pyramid. So at the prospect level, being able to identify an individual's affinity towards your cause, whether it's a veterans cause, a children's cause, a social justice cause, really allows you to narrow in on who you're going to target to move up the donor pyramid. And then as you move up, looking at first-time donors, identifying their interests, their affinities, and giving the capacity to ensure that you're making the right ask to the right person. It is kind of fundraising 101 to know that if you go and ask for a major gift from someone who's not capable, not only are you not going to get that major gift, you're probably not going to get anything. At the other end of the spectrum, when you go in and ask too low for someone who's a potential major gift person, you're either going to get that very low ask or you may not get anything at all. And then looking at the recurring and annual donors, those people that allow us to kind of build a budget because we know that their donations are coming in every month, and determine who you should focus on there to drive larger and more frequent gifts, and identifying their interests and affinities along with the wealth information and household demographics for each of those donors. Of course, there's the major gift donors, which is where most organizations really start and want to bring more of. Of course, there's the big risk with a major gift donor. If you have a major gift donor who's donating $100,000 a year and they disappear, you just lost $100,000 out of your budget. And so it's much better to have 100 donors that are donating $1,000 to you, because when one of them goes, it doesn't hurt as badly. And then lately in the past decade, there's been a huge focus, more so than in previous years, on those planned gift donors, the people who will commit a portion of their estate to you in the long term. Tends to be a much more strategic view and taken by larger, more established nonprofits, but still something that you can figure out if you know more about your donors. There are many more traits you can uncover about your donors based on the specifics that your organization needs. And you can even create unique and detailed personas for each tier to understand more about those donors and who else will look just like them, which becomes really important as you're buying lists or looking at new prospects. Now, it's worth noting, not every single donor is always going to have the growth opportunity and potential of their neighbor, but with the insights that you have, you're able to detect some hidden gems that might be ready to move to the next tier. As I mentioned, we found someone, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but someone who'd been donating for 8 years, $100 a year, and had just never been asked to become a major gift donor until we eliminated them and the major gift team went and spoke with them. This not only helps you put the right ask in front of the right person, but it also is going to weed out the least likely of the remaining donors. So again, when you've got that 80% of first-time donors who are not going to come back, it's spending less time focused on those and more on the 20% who are really going to become your lifetime donors, and spending your time and energy there. Erica, next slide, please. Now, of course, it's also very important today to create that personalized messaging. When I started 25 years ago in nonprofits, there were basically a handful of ways that you reached out to people. There was, of course, direct mail, there was the gala, and then there was in-person meetings for major gifts. Now there are so many other ways that you can communicate with individuals, and every individual is unique in how they're going to act. For instance, I have in 25 years never responded to a piece of direct mail, but I have donated via a text, I have donated via an email. And so there are organizations that if they sent me a direct mail piece, I'm likely not to donate to them. But if I had an affinity for the cause and they hit me up in an email or a phone call or a text, I might be more likely. So by uncovering each person's preferred channel, you can really better target your outreach and using what you're already familiar with, like the direct mail solutions or social media solutions, or even text messaging to really captivate your donors. Or you can use some newly emerging advertising technologies. We're working with some of our clients right now and helping them identify device IDs and targeting directly into the household with banner ads, OTT or video ads, really hitting a donor where they are and where they operate. By connecting with each of them in the ways that they want to be reached, you've unlocked the potential for greater impact. Erica, next slide, please. So we have several organizations we've implemented this with. Erica, are there any questions before I dig into kind of examples, but maybe the examples will generate some questions as well?
Yeah, we did have one come in that was asking about recommendations of how to diversify donor types. So this would be an organization that has, you know, some major donors and quite a few first-time donors, but is kind of struggling with that sort of recurring and planned gift tiers. What would kind of be your recommendation to diversify?
Actually, one of the best ways to diversify is by learning more about them. And so being able to use a predictive analytics tool that will bring in third-party data, enrich your donor database with information you don't have access to, allows you to see more information about your donors and start to understand, hey, this is an individual that belongs in the major gift bucket. This is a person that belongs in the monthly sustainer program, and potentially understanding other opportunities within there. Hey, this is a person who actually looks like a really good volunteer. We'll put them in this bucket. And so it's bringing in that other information that programs will give you that allow you to understand a little bit more about your donors and build out the segments more completely. I hope that answers the question. Erica, are there any others?
That's it for now, but as Sean mentioned, if you guys have any questions, definitely drop them in the chat.
So I'm going to give you 3 quick examples, and I'm happy to give more if you've got more questions. Our first one was we picked up during the pandemic a number of food banks. And one of the big reasons was going back to that statistic I shared with you, where 80% of first-time donors don't come back. Well, food banks saw an order of magnitude increase in donations, but their development teams didn't get any bigger. And so they knew that in this massive number of new donations, which they were very grateful for, that 80% of them were not likely to come back. And so they really wanted to understand, how do I shape, into the question that was just asked, how do I segment my donors appropriately so that I'm going after them and asking the right questions? And so what they were able to do is they were able to enrich the data they had, and all they had was name and email addresses of the current donors, but they were able to enrich it with our predictive analytics tool. And in doing so, really determine who were their small donors, who were their mid-level donors, who were their major gift donors. And even before that, identify out of all of them, who are the 80% that are not likely to come back and who are the 20% that will. And then with that, in that 20%, really understanding through custom models of previous donors, who's going to do the most as we move through the donor pyramid, and putting people in their own donor pyramid in the right place. So they were able to apply custom models they built to score their new donors, ultimately defining the tier that each one belonged in. And when they did this, they were also able to figure out what were the personalized messages they were going to send out. So rather than taking all their new donors and sending a generic donate more message, they were able to take a segment of them and approach them with an ask to become a monthly sustainer. They were able to take another segment of them and pass them to the major gifts team and have the major gifts team start making phone calls to them and bring them in. And so in doing so, many of our food banks were able to really expedite what they were doing as a development team in spite of a large number of new donors. Next slide, please, Erica. This next one is the one I alluded to earlier, one of our favorites. For those of you not familiar with Charity Navigator, they're somewhat like GuideStar. They rate nonprofits. They are themselves a nonprofit. And they wanted to focus initially on major gifts. And we call these our hidden gems campaign, because we're convinced if you've got a good sized donor database, there are hidden gems in there. Whether that hidden gem is a major gift donor, a monthly recurring donor, there are gems in there that you just haven't spoken to yet in the right way with the right message. So they uploaded in their first week their major gift donors. The system built them a model within about 8 hours, sent them a note back saying it was built. And they then applied that to the 2,100 people who had donated less than $100 to them. Out of the 2,100 people, the results were they were able to increase donations from those people by 42%. And within them, one of the first people they called made a $20,000 donation. The only thing they were really upset about was that person had been donating $100 a year for 8 years. So that person had been sitting in the donor database, a faithful donor, but had just never been approached with the right ask and in the right medium, which was a phone call and a personal engagement. Next slide, please. The last organization I'll come to is actually one of our first. Ironic is a West Point grad that the first service academy I started working with was the Air Force Academy. But they've been wonderful, and they started with us. They use us for a variety of things now, but they really wanted to start with their direct mail campaigns. And what was fascinating for us was they wanted to test us. And so in their first year, they had a score using our model on people who would respond to direct mail. So we took their entire direct mail list, we scored it from 1 to 100, and we basically told them, hey, people who are 59 and below score, don't send mail to. Anybody who scores a 60 and above, you should send direct mail to. In the first year, they still decided to send direct mail out to everybody. And what was really illuminating is at the end of the year, what they came back to us with is that not a single person we scored 59 or below made a direct mail donation, but all of their donations came from the people who had scored 60 and above. And so it showed the efficacy of it. And what was great is they weren't losing those people. What they were able to do is take those people who scored 59 and below and put them through other predictive models on people who respond to social, people who respond to text messages, people who respond to email or phone. And it allowed the development team to then go out and re-engage those people in the medium that was most appropriate. The results they saw overall, they saw a 6x increase in response to campaigns as they went forward using the model. Next slide, please. So as you can see, leveraging predictive fundraising can truly move your donors to new levels and maximize the potential, also increasing loyalty. If you're hitting up a person with the right messaging in the right place, you're going to keep them tighter to you. So delivering higher value donations and even adding more to the right donors in your donor pyramid and not wasting a lot of time on those people who are just not going to progress. The beauty of predictive fundraising is that as your campaign garners results, you're able to feed those back into the workflow and increase the learning. And that's hence the name, the machine learning. So every time you do a campaign, anybody who donates becomes positive training data. Anybody who doesn't donate becomes negative training data, and your model only gets stronger. And so every year you're doing this, your results are getting stronger and stronger. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, when's the best time to plant a tree? It's 40 years ago. The next best time is today. And so while a lot of you may have not started building models yet, now is the time to start doing it so that they're as strong as they can be over the next 3 to 10 years. Erica, last slide, please. So I would say, remember that the future of fundraising actually starts today. And by adding the tools we discussed into your workflows, you're certain to see amplified results. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, give other examples, anything like that.
Sure. We had another question come in, Sean, that was asking about they're an organization that's new, kind of starting out, and they're not currently using donor pyramids. So what would be your recommendation for them to really get started with, thinking about their donors in that way?
Yep. And kind of the way I answered the other question, it's just getting to understand who your donors are. So whether you've got, 50 donors, 500 donors, 5,000 donors, it's really just starting to understand. And it's interesting because commercial companies go through the same problem. Direct to consumer businesses right now, especially e-commerce companies, what do they know about their customers? They know their name, their email address, their postal address, and what they bought, but they really know nothing else about them. And for the most part, nonprofits are in a very similar situation. You know who donated to you, you know what email address if they made it online, you know their postal address if they gave you that, and you know how much they donated. But beyond that, you really don't know much about them. And so using predictive analytics, where you're able to enrich your current database and really start to gain some insights about who's sitting in there, will help you start to build that donor pyramid. And then more importantly, help you navigate that pyramid. And instead of doing the traditional, let's just move everybody one rung at a time, really start at the bottom rung of prospects and say, hey, this individual actually belongs up here. We're going to jump them 3 rungs, or this individual just shouldn't be in the pyramid at all. I hope that answers the question.
Great. If not, feel free to jump in the chat and let us know. Another quick question for you, Sean, is, for nonprofits that are new to this predictive fundraising concept, what would kind of be like your 3 tips for them to kind of get rolling with that?
The first tip I gave at the end, which is get started immediately. You didn't start this 40 years ago. The tree's not in full bloom, but that doesn't mean it's too late. It is a bad thing to put it off further. The second thing is look at how the tools you're using. So your CRM, your bidding tools, if you're using a payments platform, on the resources they offer to collect data. So as I said, most nonprofits will tell you they have very limited data, and it's because they haven't focused on collecting it. Today, the tools that you're already using, your CRM and other tools, leave a lot of resources for your ability to collect more data. And that data will become very powerful to you over time. So tip number 2 would be just really focus on the data that's out there that you can collect. And tip number 3 would be, don't be scared. I know a lot of people, when they hear AI and machine learning, they picture the chrome shiny head with the red eyes coming at them. And the reality is it's just not that at all. And as I said, one of our big goals was not to try and teach development teams to become data scientists and modelers, but to give them a tool that's as easy as Zoom to use, where at the press of a button, they can engage machine learning and data science, get the results they need, and start carrying forward with it. So technology has made amazing advancements. Leverage those and embrace those for your own benefit, making your job easier.
Great. And then Liz is asking, for a fairly new organization, less than 3 years, what are some good practices around collecting info on prospects? And then what are some good size donor/prospect databases that you would recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we got asked over our first 2 years, because our whole focus of our platform was on prospect prioritization. So when I gave you the example of what we did with Charity Navigator, we took their current donors and modeled them, and then we overlaid it on top of a certain set of donors they had to help them understand those donors better and who they should be going after for major gifts. What we repeatedly get asked for is, that's great, I need new donors. How do I go find new donors? And when we went through kind of the discovery of how nonprofits go buy new donors, in my experience sitting on boards is they spend a lot of money buying leads, and they typically do it by giving out demographic categories. Hey, we think our donors are Caucasian women between the ages of 40 and 50 who have 1 child at home and are professionals. They might have 20 to 30 demographic categories that they're looking at. Their problem is there's 10,000 other nonprofits that have those same demographic categories. And so what was happening is that list was being sold and resold and sold again. And then all those people are getting inundated with all these offerings. And so it wasn't working out real well. You saw really low response rates. So what we decided to do is we went through the exercise of modeling all 240 million adult Americans last year. And now what we can do is we can take an organization, even a small organization that's only 3 years old, and take what they consider their best donors. Doesn't have to be their major gift donors. Maybe it's everyone who's given more than twice. And so we take all of those people, you model it, and now you're able to overlay that model because it's built on affinity-based data points, not a generic set of demographic data points, and overlay it on the population of 240 million Americans and discern the 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 who look the most like your best donors. And now you can start doing digital ads to them in Facebook, in LinkedIn and Instagram, or banner ads or OTT, as I talked about. And what we're seeing now are just phenomenal conversion rates. As most of you know, for digital ads, conversion rates average out at about 9%. In the past 90 days that we've been running this, our conversion rates are anywhere from 20 to 80%. And so we've got a series of customers right now that what they're doing, Liz, is micro campaigns. So we had a client last month that was a university that was raising for one of their centers. So they weren't raising for the university themselves, not focused on alumni, but focused on a center which could draw interest. And so all they did was they gave us their creative, and they gave us their, it was about 500 donors that looked the most like their best donors that they wanted more of. And after that, over the course of the 3 weeks of April, they spent $2,750 with us, which bought them 10,000 leads, as well as the ability to advertise for 3 weeks to those people. And in that 3 weeks, they picked up 55 new donors and $38,000. And so now what they're doing every month is just running one of these micro campaigns. For most nonprofits in a vacuum, 55 new donors and $38,000 may not be huge, but when you only spend $2,750 in there to get that, and when you can do that every single month with limited effort and not pulling away from the work you're doing on your gala or the work you're doing on your race or the work you're doing with major gift donors, that becomes pretty profitable.
Awesome. Good ROI. Yes, you're right, Liz. All right. Anybody else have any other questions? I'm going to take that as a no, but thank you so much, Sean, for joining us today. Certainly a lot of great learnings. We really appreciate it. And again, everyone, you will receive the recording and the slides, so no need to worry if you missed something. You can always reference back. But thank you so much, Sean.
Erica, thanks for having me. If anybody does have questions, all my information's there. Feel free to reach out. I'll definitely make myself available. But appreciate you taking the time. And Erica, thank you so much for having us today.
Yes, thank you so much. We love the work that you guys do. Have a good one.
Take care.